Imagine this, it's 850 AD. An elderly abbot stumbles through the Irish countryside, fleeing for his life. Behind him, rebels have set fire to his abbey. In his trembling hands, he clutches a wooden staff, the pallium, sent from Rome as a reward for his loyalty. He crosses into Britain, seeking refuge at Glastonbury, where he'll spend his final days. Now here's the twist, this man is named Patrick. But he's not the Patrick you've heard about. He's the second Patrick, the one history has deliberately confused with Ireland's greatest saint. This confusion wasn't an accident. It was a calculated strategy by Rome to claim ownership of a story that never belonged to them. Welcome back to our three-part journey through Britain's forgotten Christian past. We've explored how Christianized Druids became the first priests of the Culdee Church, and how these persecuted believers survived 2.5 centuries of Roman violence to emerge stronger than ever. Today, we're asking, what happens when the church that resisted Rome for 8 centuries suddenly finds itself rewritten as Rome's greatest victory? Here's the central question, how did saints who spent their lives opposing Roman authority get transformed into champions of the very system they fought against, and what does this tell us about who really controls history? It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe and share. Help build my channel and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Let's start with a simple fact that should shock every history student: the British Church was never heretical. In an era when theological controversies split Christianity into dozens of competing factions, when being on the wrong side of a doctrinal debate could mean exile or death, the British Church never faced a single charge of false teaching. Not one. Even Pelagius, the great heresiarch himself, was one of their most prominent and learned abbots. In the late 4th century, Saint Hilary of Poitiers wrote to the British Church, "I congratulate you on having remained undefiled in the Lord, and untainted by all the contagion of damnable heresy. Oh, the unshaken steadfastness of your glorious conscience! Undefiled, untainted, unshaken." While Christianity fractured elsewhere, the British Church held steady. But then came Pelagius, or as he was known in his native tongue, Maurienne, the 20th abbot of Bangor-on-Dee. Heresy was actually an attempted revival of Druidism, specifically, the ancient Druidic ideas about human nature and free will. The beauty of his Latin compositions, his extensive learning, and his reproachless life helped his ideas spread rapidly. But here's what's fascinating, his teaching was quickly suppressed in Britain itself. The very church that produced him rejected his theology. This was a church that valued truth over tribal loyalty. The Pelagian storm was raging when God prepared one of the brightest lights in Celtic Christianity for his life's work, a man named Maelgwyn, born in 363 AD in Llantwit Major, Glamorganshire. You know him better as Patrick. Patrick's story begins in a solidly documented British Christian family. His father, Calpurnius, was a presbyter of the British Church. His grandfather was a deacon. Both served at St. Illtyd's in Llantwit Major. Calpurnius was principal of this college while simultaneously serving as a Roman official, probably a praevarius, a district justiciary-in-chief. Young Patrick grew up with unique advantages, deep knowledge of British church governance combined with understanding of Roman law. By tradition, Patrick was a Culdee and the son-in-law of a bard, placing him firmly within the cultural matrix where Christian faith, Druidic learning, and bardic tradition intertwined. But in 379 AD, Patrick's comfortable world shattered. Niall of the Nine Hostages led one of his raids across the Irish Sea. Niall's warriors burst into Llantwit Major and seized 16-year-old Patrick, dragging him into captivity in Ireland. For years, Patrick served as a slave. Eventually, he escaped to Gaul. But nearly 50 years after his capture, this elderly man returned to Ireland not for revenge, but for revival. Patrick is credited with introducing the Latin language to Irish Christianity, though previous missionaries had used chiefly Greek. But Latin didn't rapidly supplant Greek. Professor H. Zimmer noted that by the 10th century, it was almost a truism that whoever knew Greek on the continent was either Irish or taught by an Irishman. The Irish schools became legendary centers of learning, preserving both Christian scripture and classical wisdom through the Dark Ages. But here's where the historical manipulation begins. The Venerable Bede, writing in the 8th century, doesn't mention Patrick at all. Why? Because Bede was an earnest adherent of the papal church introduced to Britain in 664 AD. To Bede, the Culdee hierarchy with its hereditary succession was obnoxious, completely contrary to Rome's centralizing vision. Instead, Bede spoke of Palladius, Patrick's contemporary, a Caledonian and Culdee who became an emissary of the Roman See. Rome was resolutely setting itself to grasp universal dominion in the Christian Church. Baronius, a later Roman Catholic historian, stated bluntly, the bishops of Ireland were all schismatics, separated from the Church of Rome. Separated, not heretical, not unorthodox, simply separated, refusing to acknowledge Roman supremacy. Many saints of the British Church were later claimed by the Latin Church. Those who owed nothing to Rome, who struggled against her pretensions their entire lives, were posthumously claimed as though they had been her most devoted adherents. This is especially noticeable with Patrick. Here was a man whose conversion resulted from training in a British home, who was a Culdee all his life, who represented everything distinct about Celtic Christianity. Yet today, he's given the greatest prominence in Roman Catholic hagiology. And here's where it gets truly sinister. The papal church deliberately created confusion between the 5th century Culdee Saint Patrick and a completely different Patrick from the 9th century. According to the Chronicles of Ireland, in the year 850, there was another Patrick, an abbot of Ireland and confessor. This second Patrick was given to superstition and founded the fabulous St. Patrick's Purgatory, that still exists as a pilgrimage site today. During a rebellion, this Patrick fled to Britain and was buried at Glastonbury. The Martyrology of Sarum reports that Ireland kept his feast on the 24th of August. And it was to this second Patrick, not the great missionary saint, that the Pope sent the pallium as a reward for his Romanizing zeal. This was the first appearance of the pallium in Ireland, that ceremonial vestment symbolizing papal authority. Two different men, two different centuries, two entirely different characters, one deliberately confused with the other to serve Rome's narrative. This pattern of appropriation continued with Saint Columba, born in 522 AD, about 50 years after the death of the real Patrick. Columba was fourth in descent from Niall of the 9 hostages himself. In 565 AD, on Pentecost Eve, he arrived at the island of Iona from Ireland with his 12 disciples. 12, always 12, maintaining that apostolic pattern the Culdees held sacred. But Iona wasn't empty when Columba arrived. Its native name was Inishnan Druidnig, the Isle of Druids. Druids whose predecessors had fled there from Roman persecution had long made it their home. Columba and his disciples didn't conquer the Druids. Historical records show they settled down with them, building a monastery before turning their attention to missionary work in Scotland. The most famous Celtic Christian monastery was founded alongside Druids, on the Isle of Druids, continuing that pattern of transformation rather than replacement that we've been tracking throughout this series. One of Columba's successors, Bython, became renowned for both holiness and scholarship. A learned man of his time said, "Know that there is no one on this side of the Alps who is equal to him in knowledge of the scriptures." Montalembert wrote of Columba himself, "Columba is not to be compared to philosophers and learned men, but with patriarchs and apostles." But here's something that should startle anyone who knows British history. Although Columba was only a presbyter, not a bishop, he established the little kingdom of the Scots and set upon the throne King Aidan, whose lineal descendant today occupies the throne of Great Britain. A presbyter crowned kings, and his power was absolute. For many years after his death, the abbot and Culdees of Iona gained so much favor and esteem that even in their cloistered retreats they were at the head of all civil as well as ecclesiastical matters. For 200 years, Iona was the lighthouse for the Western nations, sending forth missionaries in all directions. And it housed a library, a great collection of books that predated even Columba's arrival. Here's a fascinating historical detail. Fergus II of Scotland, who in his youth assisted Alaric the Goth at the sack of Rome in 410 AD, brought away as plunder some valuable treasures and a chest of books. He later presented these to the monastery of Iona. Wait, 410 AD. That's 155 years before Columba arrived in 565. This proves definitively that Columba's famous library wasn't founded by Columba at all. It was founded by the Druids, those same Druids whose presence on the island predated Christian settlement. Centuries later, Aeneas Sylvius, who would become Pope Pius II, sent a legate to Scotland to search for lost books of Livy among Iona's collection. The continuity is staggering. From Druidic scholars to Christian monks, through Viking raids and medieval transfers, this learning was preserved, passed down, protected. So what's the central truth we're circling? The ancient Church of Britain was the same as all other churches planted by the apostles, with whom it was in full communion. But it had its own character, its own structures, its own succession. The primitive church everywhere was fundamentally monastic. There was episcopacy, bishops, but not diocesan episcopacy as Rome would later insist upon. There was no papal jurisdiction. When Rome finally pushed into these territories, they encountered not ignorance but sophistication. Not heresy but orthodoxy. Not Roman authority but apostolic authority of a different kind. And so they did what powers always do when they can't defeat something: they claimed it. They rewrote it. They transformed saints who resisted Rome into saints who represented Rome. Patrick, who spent his life as a Culdee, became a Roman Catholic icon. Columba, who crowned kings without Rome's permission, was sanitized into a more acceptable narrative. The entire British Church, which had maintained its independence for 8 centuries, was retroactively absorbed into Rome's story. But here's what they couldn't erase: the archaeological record. The manuscripts, the church dedications, the hereditary succession records, the councils where British bishops appeared centuries before Rome claimed authority over them. So back to our central question: how did saints who spent their lives opposing Roman authority get transformed into champions of the very system they fought against? The answer is simple and chilling. History is written by those with the printing presses, the institutional power, and the motivation to rewrite the past. For 1,000 years, Rome controlled what could be written, what could be preserved, what could be taught. The story of the Culdee Church, of Christian Druids, of hereditary bishops, of absolute abbots who crowned kings, of churches that existed in full apostolic succession without acknowledging Rome at all, this story was too dangerous to preserve accurately. So it was buried under layers of legend. Names were confused, dates were shifted, motivations were rewritten. Heroes of Celtic independence became, in official histories, champions of Roman submission. But in the places where they walked, the memory remained. An old man in the Scottish Highlands calling God Archdruid. Irish monks preserving Greek when Europe had forgotten it. Standing stones called clachons, that meant both temple and church. Sons succeeding fathers in episcopal seats for 15 generations. These were the remnants of something ancient, authentic, and powerful, a Christianity that grew from British soil, was nurtured by Christianized Druids, survived Roman persecution, and thrived in separation from Rome for 8 centuries. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.